The way science progresses is in fits and starts.
Results of this experiment,
Chemists have the answer.
astonished the scientific world.
You learn the literature and you figure out where the truth is.
It's not happening today. There seems to be one narrative.
Red meat's been copying a lot of bad
The
pests.
years that red meat causes
The thing
cancer,
that causes heart
colon,
disease,
pancreatic, and
saturated
prostate
fat.
cancer.
Gonna die if you eat like
Animal
that.
protein.
Whenever you see things going all one way, your skepticism should go way up. How pathetic our approach was to the complex landscape of our fat metabolism.
But if you choose low fat or the skim milk dairy products,
America. Too many rely on fad diet.
you need meat as a garnish.
6 months on no carbs. For me, my HDL went up to high 60s. My triglycerides went from consistently 225 down to 70. Just
Oh my gosh.
like that. There's a lot for us to talk about.
Hi, everyone. Today, we are going to rethink meat with a huge hero of mine, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and he's going to tell us all about his health transformation and what he believes to be the link between mental health, physical health, diet, and I couldn't be more excited to have you. So thank you for making time to be with me, Dr. Drew.
You know that I'm like this, I embarrass myself. I'm like this silly fangirl of your products. It's like I'm sure it gets annoying, but
No.
it is categorically the case. Both Susan and I ran down to the kitchen to get our bone broth before we came over here. It was part of our daily. Yeah, I'm going to sound like weird. I'm going to sound like some sort of a fangirl, but
No.
just know that your products have really helped me maintain my diet the way I want to maintain it, and that I appreciate having had these conversations with you about how clean your products are and how they're produced a certain way. You know, it's just such a great. It just pushes back on everything that people worry about when it comes to meat and meat products, and so I'm just happy to be here. So,
Oh, thank you, Dr. Drew. And it will never get old hearing you or
all
Susan.
right, well, I'll say it again. Then.
No, we don't have to go on, but I'm just saying.
But I'll tell you what, it is. There's a lot for us to talk about because, you know, we have lived through. I hope people understand, having now lived through COVID, that the way science progresses is in fits and starts, and bureaucratic messaging around science and diet especially is anachronistic. It's often distorted by influences that are sort of shouldn't be involved in the process, and I hope people kind of see that now. I actually was unaware of it. I was very trusting. I had full faith in NIH and IMH and the CDC, and I believe that will be restored again one day. But you know, I do know how science is done, and one of the crazy things during COVID is all the medical literature went one direction, and that's never the way science goes. It's always a back and forth. You learn the literature, you learn the back and forth and the arguments, and you figure out where the truth is. Whenever you see things going all one way, your skepticism should go way up. And so us and fats have been that way for a long time. In the meantime, food industry, no fault of theirs, they're just doing their job, have figured out ways to give us yummier and yummier and more addictive stuff, largely built around carbohydrate. And look, I can remember when you're too young for this. There was a period where back, I would say back when the whole fats thing got going, really was the cardiology community that got it off really put the rocket fuel behind it. Mm-hmm. And they followed on with, you should be eating bread and pasta. Now that's the answer. More pasta. And literally pasta restaurants, like coffee shop style pasta outlets were sort of popping up here and there. I remember on Robertson in Beverly Hills, there was one. I remember thinking, well, I love pasta, but I'm not sure this is we're going a little too far with this.
Oh yeah.
And lo and behold, now we know, and again, know should always be in quotes, right? We believe, we have a good sense of carbohydrate being a major player in some of the ways we all get off the rail. And we can talk about it both in terms of cardiovascular health, mental health, and obesity. These are sort of three different topics.
Yeah.
So I'll let you kind of guide me.
Yes, I would love to. And
I'll
thank
go back
you.
to my bone broth.
Yes, me too. I have the same thing. But yes, thank you, Dr. Drew. You're absolutely correct. I love that you started with that. There needs to be a back and forth and a refining of science that's not happening today. There seems to be one narrative. Now, there must have been a moment for you. Like you said, you kind of bought it. You had some doubts about the carbohydrate piece, but what was that moment when it became really clear for you that this was happening in the food industry? And what did your health transformation look like?
So it's kind of a long story. I think I had three moments I would point out. One was, I'm on Adam Carolla's platform. I've been there for like 10 years. He and I did Loveline years ago, and we still do a podcast together. And he's got a friend named Vinny Tortorich, who was Vinny's a trainer here in Los Angeles. And he had this no starch, no grain, and no sugar sort of philosophy. He said, look, I've walked thousands of people now through diet, and this is the one that's sustainable and the healthiest. And he has a concept. He's actually done 2 documentaries on this, that just the word fat itself biases our whole approach to these animal products that contain things like fatty acids and fats of various types. Yeah. And so I started thinking, well, okay, that's interesting. I definitely knew I had a problem with carbohydrates. I knew it because I could just tell. Over the years, I'd always try to cut them out, and I would go through one time I remember I thought, oh man, this is what my heroin addicts go through. This is the withdrawal that they have. I remember being irritable, discontent, desperate. Desperation is this one feature of withdrawal that a lot of people aren't aware of. It's just you're like all the time, and it's because you want, your brain's like, get me that thing I want. And I went through that for about 3 to 5 days, and I thought, wow, this is a minor version of what this is. The same thing. It's the exact same thing. And so I knew there was trouble. I knew there was a problem. Then along the way there, I started getting in conversations with a guy named David Feldman, who has been doing a lot of interesting research, and he's a data analyst, but he's been looking at this going, wait a minute, something's really wrong here. Much the same way we look at all the vaccine and COVID stuff. It's like, wait a minute, we're not getting the whole story. Yeah. And then I met Kate Shanahan. Do you know Kate?
I do.
Kate was the nutritionist, doctor for the Lakers for a while. She wrote a book called Deep Nutrition. And she is in addition to being an excellent family practitioner and a good physician, she was a biochemist before she was a doctor, like a real scientist, real deal, much like yourself. Yeah. And she said to me, she goes, look, diet, come on. It's so complicated. I mean, the chemistry, forget the biochemistry, just the physics, it's just impossible to say anything. But she goes, but I can say something about fats. There's an area there I can categorically distinguish between the effects of healthy fats and unhealthy fats. And we have gone way off the rail with these polyunsaturated fats, the unhealthy, and really are literally carcinogenic when they replace the tallow with the vegetable oils. And please, everybody, these oils, the things you think you should be cooking with that are going to avoid the animal fats are going to give you heart disease, make you fat, and I don't know how to make you fat. I may have just added that myself, but it feels like, because is it on there?
No, it doesn't impact. There's linoleic acid specifically impacts the endocannabinoid system, which can impact your appetite, which, inevitably
fuels it. And so coronary disease and it's inflammatory, it's pro-inflammatory. And I think, and Kate recently said she thinks a lot of the complications of COVID came from deposition of these unhealthy fatty acids left behind in our adipose tissue. So she's another person that influenced me. And then, interestingly, this guy just texted me while I'm sitting here talking about him. And a guy I did Loveline with, another guy I did Loveline with for a while, and he's a very diligent health and fitness guy. And we did a podcast for a minute on these topics, and he just kept hammering on me about diet. And this was about 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago. And I kept saying, I'm too old for this. I don't care. Come on, stop. And we just did one podcast after another about these issues and the importance of them. And I really was thinking to myself, I can't do it. That's really kind of what I was thinking. And I interviewed, shoot, I'm blanking his name now. The carnivore guy, the orthopedic surgeon, doctor.
The orthopedic surgeon. There's Saladino, there's Sean Baker.
Sean Baker is an orthopedic surgeon. It's Sean Baker. And he came to my house and we did a podcast together, and he was a great guy. Yeah. And I just turned to Mike Catherwood, who was the guy I was doing the podcast with. I said, I think I could do the carnivore thing. I can do easy things. I can just make it easy. Just I'm gonna eat meat. That's it. Red meat. And I was already convinced about the fats and the red meats and how pathetic our and sort of unidimensional our approach was to the complex landscape of our fat metabolism. And so I started doing that, and I did that almost perfectly for like 2 years. And I will tell you, within 3 days, I felt better. I was sleeping better. My mood was better. My affect was better. So, sleep right, hungry, angry, lonely, tired is things we always talk about in recovery and mental health. So, adequate nutrition, you shouldn't be hungry all the time. And Vinny, back to his thing, was if you're trying these calorie restricted things, you're gonna be hungry all the time, and eventually you're gonna eat. And just in the meantime, see, I told you this landscape is a little bit more complicated than maybe you wish. But in the meantime, more data has come in on the insulin story, the story of insulin as it pertains to cardiovascular disease in particular, and pro-inflammatory in general, thereby affecting the brain and brain function. So I, back in maybe 2010, there were sort of some physicians getting, I thought, over their skis talking about inflammation. They kept talking about inflammation, and I didn't know they never explained what they were talking about. I'm not even sure they understood, frankly, what they were talking about. But I'm really, because some of them were dermatologists and stuff. I was like, what are you talking about? But it really was not inflammatory in the sense that we think about medically, where there's a cytokine activation and these white cells are driven to certain areas and unleashing extreme inflammation. It's sort of this low level activation of particularly the endothelial system. And I think that's where you and I are going to kind of chat, because our arteries are lined with cells, and those cells that line our arteries throughout our body, everywhere, they're called endothelial cells, form what now we finally start to think about and is literally an organ system. It's an organ system of its own. And when you think of it that way, all the pieces kind of fall in place in the area that we're talking about.
That was so beautiful. So you are of the opinion, before we get into that a little bit, that physical health and mental health, they're the same, because that's relatively a novel concept.
Yeah, I get mystified by people that want to put the brain over here and the rest of the body over here. It is like insane. It's insane. It's the most stupid thing. They either ignore the embeddedness of the brain in the autonomic nervous system and the organ system, that we have feelings come from our body. That's where feelings come from. And we don't even understand fully yet the autonomic system input into all this, but trust me, it's massive. So the brain is embedded in a body in terms of its functioning, but in terms of its overall health, it's another organ system in the body. And of course, cardiopulmonary, cardiovascular health, very critical. The whole thing is set up to supply the brain. And so, of course, it's going to be influenced by all this stuff. And people skip that piece oftentimes, which is a mistake. We have, good evidence now that mild to moderate depression is adequately treated with long walks and classical music and proper nutrition. It just measures, it does well against other pharmacotherapeutic interventions or psychotherapeutic interventions. So these are all important things. It's about paying attention to all the aspects that come to bear. And sort of more recently for me, I ran and got this book. This is a friend. Do you know who Peter Attia is? It's another name on your.
I do.
Yeah. Yep. Here's Peter's new book, right? Have you seen it? Did he send it to you?
I haven't read it yet. No.
It's probably the best sort of. Of course, it's excellent because it's Peter, right? He was a cancer surgeon who became a longevity specialist. He's an exquisite thinker, and he lays out lipid metabolism in a way that I thought, everybody can get this. He just lays it right out. And if you want to, I just recommend it if people are interested in, it's around the page 100 or so, he gets into it and just lays it out nicely. And there's lots of weird little, I can't do it as well as he can. And there's lots of weird little, I can't. That's why I ran a guy. I thought, can I tell it the way he did? I can't. But I can give you some highlights. and of course the highlights are, not all the LDLs are the same, and the smaller molecules, the highly oxidized molecules, and the whole story about cholesterol has been completely. I mean, I saw a cardiologist on some social media post the other day. What are the 3 things you would tell tell the world as a cardiologist? He goes, well, first of all, I would never tell anybody don't eat eggs. Please eat eggs. They're very good for you. Eat eggs. And so eggs have been in my diet for quite some time. And cut out the yolk. Well, maybe in certain situations, but no, but I don't.
Yeah,
not necessarily. But anyway, the other thing that I kind of that helped me sort of synthesize some of the I don't know, maybe motivate to synthesize some of the cholesterol and lipid stuff, is thinking that it's possible. This is not dogma yet. This is not proven. It's possible that really the culprit is the small LDL, the small lipoprotein particles, and the macrophages being pro-inflammatory and hitting the endothelium, sort of breaching the endothelium and causing local inflammation, and that cholesterol itself may actually be some of the scar formation of the body trying to repair this thing that the highly oxidized molecules injured. And so cholesterol itself is not even involved, maybe in this process. And so that to me sort of motivated me to look a lot more carefully at what's going on here. And I do believe that not one size fits all. That even though we need to completely adjust our orientation to fats and lipoprotein, there are a high degree of variability amongst individuals. And Peter in the book points out the whole LP little a story, which and whether or not certain apolipoprotein A versus B and what you have, and ApoE, and there's stuff you can get genetically. I think I've got, frankly, because we had terrible vascular disease in my family, and strangely, what's called large vessel vascular disease, which is a kind of an unusual variant of vascular disease. Generally, you can get coronary disease and have a clean aorta. Not in my family. And so I really started thinking that I'm probably, and I've never really done the full profile. I should do it. I just figured insulin was the culprit. And when I really got rid of the carbohydrates and focused on healthy fats, by the way, my simple lipoprotein profile is just the one you generally get with your physical, the basic ones. Yeah. I could never get my HDL up. I could never get my triglycerides down. I'm on a statin. I got on it years ago because I knew about my family history. I'd always had an elevated LDL. Dave Feldman keeps yelling at me to get off it, that he guarantees me that it's not going to be all the bad LDLs given the way I'm eating. And just 6 months on no carbs. And again, it's not for everybody, but for me, my HDL went up to like high 60s. And my triglycerides went from consistently 225 down to 70. Just oh my gosh, like that. And those now are parameters. Now, when I was, a resident, we'd put our hand over everything except the LDL, and then maybe glance at the HDL to see what the balance was. Yeah. And that was about it. And so we know it's a lot more complicated now, and triglycerides and HDL do figure large into this process.
Right. And I know that for some physicians, it's kind of a parameter of the size of your LDL particles when you look at the ratio between those. So, and you obviously are eating a lot of fat. So cholesterol, not really a nutrient of concern for most people. I'd love for you to comment, does your saturated fat maybe keep your LDL elevated? Because there is evidence for some people that will raise LDL.
Not on the statin. That's like what Dave Feldman keeps saying, because you got to get off and we'll see what it really is. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm worried. It's just, here's the reason I've continued. I'm on sometimes just like a third of a tablet of both of a cholesterol manufacturing block, a statin, and the Zetia, the absorption blocking thing. Okay. And I was, the statin by itself doesn't work very well for me, but the two together were like plummeted my LDL, like really like marked response. So I only have to take a tiny piece of a pill, and I have a marked therapeutic response. And I've been doing that since I was probably 40, and the sort of proof is in the pudding, in that I've had coronary calcium score done a couple of times,
Nice.
and each time it's been 0.0. And given my family history, that's sort of extraordinary. And so I figure I'm doing something right. I don't really want to make too much change. I'm certainly not paying any price for what I'm doing. And I will tell you, though, that since my strict meat days, I've liberalized my diet a bit. I got some palate fatigue.
Yeah.
And part of it was I couldn't find anything satiating snack wise. And so that's why I got so excited about you guys. You solved my problem. And sometimes in the morning, I'm really in a hurry and got to get going. And I'm afraid I'm going to take too much bone broth, frankly, because I reach for that all the time now.
No, some people believe that, the amino acid profile, right, is protective, and you should eat it because we are only eating methionine. Okay, so you're not going to, well, in our research, we're finding too that like different saturated fatty acids raise cholesterol to a different extent, and some seem to lower, like long chain saturated fat. So I'll be interested if you ever do decide to kind of tinker a little bit more where you lie. But when it comes to the mechanisms, you said inflammation, obviously inflammation of the cardiovascular system can cause mental health issues. Do you believe there are other mechanisms by which food is impacting both mental health specifically?
Well, I mean, of course, there is what comes to mind immediately is there's this whole conversation about actually the conversation is still just getting started, but it is I almost don't know how to frame this for you, but it's essentially the effects of deprivation. And deprivation becomes, for some people, something that makes them high or is gratifying in some way. And so deprivation, if you have body image problems or you have OCD or you have eating disorder, whatever, deprivation becomes the issue. And we really don't, in mental health, we think about a lot of other stuff in terms of certainly on the positive side, but we don't think about the rewarding of it's sort of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
For some brains, deprivation is rewarding. And that is something that it's not healthy, right? It's not healthy. And so that's one area that people get in trouble with.
Have you noticed any of that with yourself? Like you said, you hit palate fatigue. Yeah. So talk about that. Like,
yes, I think that's why that probably spoke to me, is like, I thought, oh yeah, I can throughout my life, I have depriving myself had some sort of gratification associated with it. And on one hand, I think it's part of my OCD stuff. And it's a recreation of if you didn't get your needs met in childhood, it's sort of a recreation of that traumatic heritage, right? So now we're going to get into really the psychological, psychodynamic aspects of food and eating and satisfying and being fed. These are major players in our psychology, right? Yeah. And if you had emotional deprivation for any reason or abuse in childhood, obviously satisfying yourself, taking care of yourself, that goes a little sideways, and you tend to engage rather than, people have to understand the way the human brain works. We would, in the fantasy world, our storybook version of it would be, well, then you take care of yourself and you build yourself perfectly so you can start to get your own needs met. That's not how our brains work. The way our brains work is we recreate the traumas over and over and over again. And we find gratification in recreating the trauma. That's why we do that. It's motivated in some weird way in our brain. And so deprivation on food and other things become, sort of this weird cycle you get into. It's not healthy.
So noticing that in yourself and then deciding to kind of open it up, could you just give us an idea of like, what are you eating on a daily basis? What were you eating when you were seeing your transformation? And then what has it evolved to today?
So, oh my goodness. So back when I used to go through cycles of dieting, I actually had a brief eating disorder when I was like 9 years old, believe it or not. And it was
I have too.
Yeah, and it was sort of missed. It was missed. And I remember my mother dragging me to a pediatrician. And so, of course, she was the source of all the deprivation, ironically.
Oh no.
And so it was always an on again, off again relationship with food. And when I would deprive myself, it would tend to be when my mood was off. I would start doing some of that stuff.
Mm.
And of course, I was young. I had no idea what was going on.
Mm.
And it was sort of I was good at punishing myself in a lot of ways. And some of that, because I have a little OCD also, ended up working for me, right? I could do punishing amounts of studying and punishing amounts of, I could go at things. And if I didn't do perfectly, I would more, and be sort of motivated and gratified by it. And hey, it worked. Yeah. And that mechanism probably still in play to some degree. To the extent to which these things work, it's hard to undo them. I did do lots of therapy, and so a lot of this stuff is sort of gone for the most part. And back then, and probably all the way until into my 50s, it was a lot of salads and vegetables and doing fruit and doing the things you think you're supposed to do. But of course, I would eat a lot of fruit, and of course, I would eat the vegetables with crazy salad oils, unhealthy oils with salad dressings, and then I would go on regular sort of not out of control binges, but I would go, oh no, I'm done today. I'm going to have this croissant, and then it would go for a while. I would just go on these. So there was not like a structured diet back then. There was just this relationship with
push pull.
Yeah, push pull. And I've worked out my whole life. So sometimes it would be like, I'm going to get my act together. I'm going to do this right. And when I was younger, interestingly, I would go more towards eggs and steak. I remember when I was getting serious about, I would go, I just sort of challenge myself in terms of lifting heavier weights, all that kind of stuff. I'm paying that price now with my shoulders. It's great. But then when I went to meat, it was bacon and steak, almost exclusively for a couple of years. And that's hard to maintain. And I loved it because I was never hungry and I could eat sort of what I wanted, and I got lean muscle, and it was really sort of magical to me. Like, oh my God, I don't have to be hungry, and I don't have to deprive myself. And I like these food sources. I added cheese and eggs in very early. And so cheese, offers a whole array of palate satisfying things that you can't otherwise get. And I'd found interesting things to do with hamburgers and, interesting choices in restaurants, right? There was always stuff you could choose. There's always a hamburger. You can always get a hamburger without a bun, and, it's always there. Though I withheld the ketchup forever and sort of put a little bit of that back in now. So now what is it? So it was really very, very simple for years. And in recent years, again, I don't have a daily menu. I'm not that kind of person. That was what I resisted so much. I was like, I felt like people were trying to get me to follow a menu plan. And I don't have time. I can't do it. I can't plan. It's too much. I can get the foods. I can buy the foods, which a lot of people can't do. And I know that's expensive and hard, and got even more so lately, like ridiculous. But me following a menu, maybe I'll do that one of these days just to try it, but it's not really my thing. So more recently, so I started playing games a little bit with palate. I think I'm like, well, a little too far with the cheeses. I started finding, there's egg tortillas you can find. There's all kinds of things you can find that can help you to stay away from carbohydrates and still have kind of an experience that is satisfying again. And I switched my workout recently too. I've started doing more I liked lifting heavy weights, what I did my whole life. I can't do it anymore. I'm too old, shoulders don't work. And I started doing more intensive. This may be kind of interesting. More higher intensity workout, lower weights, so higher reps, that kind of thing, faster, more exercises, longer workout, and I'm way less hungry. It's adjusted, and I satiate more easily too. And so when your guys' stuff came along, it was just perfect timing because it does everything I needed to do when I'm looking for a snack.
Just mix things up. And have you noticed in those phases, like you said, you've had this transformation, has it changed the way you think? I know you're performing better, but your mind.
It has. I always feel like, well, definitely the higher intensity thing gives me more energy. And again, I'm watching this aging brain, in real time, and it's not fun. And it really is a thing. It's people that say age is just a number. It's like, screw off. It's a thing, and then
Yeah.
each of us experiences it a little differently, and hopefully we can maintain it. As Peter says, the idea is to not be a 30-year-old when you're 90. The idea is to be a 70-year-old when you're 90. If you can get that, you're in good shape. And so having energy, and that affects attentiveness and attention. And a lot of people don't realize attention is a major, being able to focus your attention is a major player in our ability to do intellectual tasks, learn, and perform intellectually. It's a first step. And sort of people don't understand how their attentional mechanisms work. We're all different. We're all very different. And you should have mastery over your own attentional mechanisms. And for me, sleep, energy, very, very important for that. Now, memory is the other kind of big issue. And memory breaks down in two broad categories, right? There's putting things as rote memorization, right? There's learning, and then putting that short-term memory into long-term storage. That is something that decays with aging, but really doesn't have to that much. It really, and I've noticed, I've been working on languages, and it's very much helped with all that. And I would say, again, with more sleep, higher intensity exercise, I'm noticing that's performance a little higher. Working memory is what most people complain about when they're older. And working memory is essentially, the way you can experience it is holding something in mind while you do something else, like remembering to go feed the dog while I go brush my teeth. That's the simplest way of doing it. And with aging, working memory gets pretty much destroyed in some cases. It certainly shrinks. And I noticed that starting in my 50s. And it was because I used to be able to do, I could not only hold three things in my mind, I kind of work on them and focus on something else. And I leaned on that mechanism. I relied on it most of my career. I don't get to do that so much anymore. You have to adjust accordingly. And again, sleep, major role in that. I'm not so sure that's so much the exercise as the sleep.
Okay. What about the food? Do you think there's a lot of demonization of meat. And what about meat and mental health? Yeah.
The main thing I worry about with food is what Peter's talking about, is sustaining, through aging, making the impact. And that's the whole inflammatory thing we were talking about. And inflammation, look, there is a whole, a friend of mine, Dan Amen, has a whole theory about inflammation and mental health. I mean, he has ways of treating the inflammatory part of our dietary indiscretions. And when I say that, I think mostly of insulin. And getting that right, he uses a lot of fatty acids, the fish oils and things, and DHA certainly seems. I know I supplement. I use this thing called Nordic Naturals. I've used for like 20 years, and their DHA product I've noticed when I go on high supplements of DHA, that seems to help the memory and working memory stuff.
Absolutely, and there is research. This is interesting. I know because neurotransmitters made from amino acids. Dr. Felice Jacka noted that red meat seemed to be protective against depression and anxiety, at least in the women that she was studying. Do you believe that the meat in particular, or is it the lack of carbohydrates? Is it the reduction in insulin, or is there something to be gained by the nutrients in meat?
Well, you can't get the nutrients in meat except by eating meat. It is one of God's gifts to humanity. The enormity of the nutritional supply provided by particularly beef, which people don't understand. It's particularly beef. This is, this extraordinary phenomenon. There's a chemical, we've discovered a new chemical transformation. We turn grasses into high quality proteins and nutrients. It's an extraordinary transformation. And God, or whatever your belief system is, has provided this to us. We should not squander it. And by the same token, I'm a big believer in, I know you are, the kind of farming and the respect to the animal and using every part of the animal. And I think that's a critically important part of this important relationship we have with the animal. I don't want to, I'm not criticizing fish and chicken and other sources. I'm gonna eat those too now. By the way, that's the other thing I've liberalized. I'm back to eating a little bit of fish, and I found that to be gratifying in ways I didn't expect. It's like I missed it somehow. And again,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to talk about. Well, that's the other part about the eating of the meat is that, yeah, you're getting all these amino acids, the availability of nutrients. Your brain uses every molecule you send it. I mean, it just does. But there's a balance there, and you can only shift it so much. And I'm not saying that if you have major depressive disorder, it's going to get better by eating meat. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if you have mood fluctuations and your sleep is off and you're feeling psychologically sort of uncared for, there is a certain amount of gratification that comes with eating meat that we never talk about as well. I mentioned Adam Carolla earlier. He talks a lot about this. He goes, there's something about the smell of the steak and the eating that has a psychological impact that you just can't really get any other way. I mean, to be fair, I get another very powerful psychological impact from eating a croissant, but I'm not sure it has the same long-term benefit.
Is that more of like an addictive thing?
It's more addictive, more yummy, more of that, less suitable to my age bracket. So
no, that makes perfect sense. And also you hinted on something I really care about a lot is the way that animals are raised and just kind of the demonization. So you know a little bit about this, you understand. So why do you think, given that meat is an important part of our heritage, our history, our health, who's demonizing it? How did that whole story unfold?
It's really hard to understand. In fact, I did a podcast with a dairy farmer, a woman. I can't remember her name. You probably know her, and she runs a dairy farm, and she has a similar concern, exactly this concern. It's like how we're so careful with these animals. We're so good to them. They don't understand that this is all. We're paying attention to the ecosystem, and cow burps. What's going on in the cow's stomach? It's not the cow farts; it's the cow burps. There are ways to take care of that, and we're working on it, and that is not an issue. And this is a major way to contribute to the ecosystem, not to withdraw from or to damage it. I don't listen. I'll just point everybody to the lipid story or the COVID story. Look at what science does. We take these positions and everybody runs to one side of the boat. And it's rarely the whole story. If it comes from a bureaucratic source, be skeptical. And if there's panic associated with it, we should have like a big stop sign, like stop and think about this. And unfortunately, the dairy farming and meat production and meat consumption has been folded into the panic around climate. And so it's got a hysteria around it. And it's an easy hysteria to whip up because the poor animals, they're being mistreated. You're eating the animals. That's terrible. It's like, listen, we are biological entities that exist in an ecosystem. We have a symbiotic relationship with domestic animals. It can be maintained. We sustain the species at a level they could never be sustained on their own. And I understand the discomfort. I get it. There's a little, I get it. It's, if we don't like to admit that that's what we are as these biological agents, but that's what we are. That's what we are. And this, this really serves our biology in ways that other things just can't.
Yeah.
And it's humble belief. And I've lived it. I've lived through it. I've done, vegetables and fruit. I've done fish for years. That's right. I didn't tell you when I was doing the fruit and vegetables, I was just fish. That was it. Fish. Wow. And it got very, it's so funny that now when I add fish back, I really enjoy it, but I ate so much fish back then, it got distasteful to me. It was weird. I got a little bit sort of, I never experienced, I got fatigue with beef, but it never became not satisfying to me. I didn't not like it. I always liked it.
Yeah. And right. There's certain people that just can't sustain themselves on just meat or just fish. And they actually require beef and kind of like these higher purine. There's a lot of theories.
Well, I was gonna say, but there's mechanisms afoot, right? It may not just be I don't like it anymore. My brain may be telling me something.
There's important feedback.
And usually, and I will tell you, usually it is the case. You keep, we want to know more about the brain and mental health. Usually it is the case. There's a biological underpinning to everything that humans experience, and either how they got there or what they're actually experiencing in the moment. There's a biological component or explanation at its core. And so pay attention. If you're having these feelings about consuming these products, there's probably a good reason for it.
Yes, absolutely. And when it comes to, we've talked a lot about fats, but fat is also very, very important for the health of the brain. Would you like to say anything about how the quality of your fats might specifically impact the brain?
That's linoleic acids and these and all the available array of healthy fatty acids. Your brain is just a giant gel of cells built by fatty acids, and so it is. And if there's going to be new cell formation and glial health, you're going to need a steady supply of good fats. That's
Yes.
the way I think of it.
Absolutely. And so how do you, like, obviously it sounds like you're eating a lot of meat and you're not super on board with feedlots. So how are you sourcing your meat? What are the criteria you're looking for? Do you think the way an animal is raised impacts its nutrient profile, or are you just worried
Oh,
about environmental concerns?
well, I do think I think a little bit about the nutrient profile and the fatty acid profile. So grass-fed beef for sure,
Yeah.
and finished for sure. But I don't, I'm a little lazy. I don't insist on it, and I probably should. And that's just laziness on my part. Like, in other words, when I go to a restaurant, my only choice is a hamburger. I don't go, is this finished beef? Is this finished? I just eat the hamburger.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. I really don't. And I just think we need to have some balance, right? And I think
Yeah,
meat is
I
better than a
control the stuff
pastry.
I can't control. I try to pay attention to, and I am, such a fan of people, of farmers, and the industry that's paying attention and doing this right. However I can support them, I do. So I look for that.
Yeah, it's funny that the whole narrative around meat being dangerous, like well-managed grasslands are one of our most important systems in our whole environment. Like they
Yep.
sequester carbon, they have these fungal systems, right? They're producing this food. It's just amazing how backwards it can be, but how when you get the nuance, it's really important.
Well, I just what I like is I hope you weren't sort of an outlier in your training, but the fact that in the high order education they're coming back. They're coming back around because the science speaks for itself.
That's exactly right. And it's just kind of like antibiotics, or we didn't realize about the microbiome, right? We didn't realize fertilizers, pesticides would have these impacts. Now they do. We didn't realize overgrazing was a problem. Now we understand the soil biology and why we can't kind of continue down this path. So do you have any concerns when it comes to antibiotics, chemicals, pesticides, any of that in terms of how it might impact human health?
Well, I mean, because I'm not in the industry, I don't really pay attention to it. Obviously, these things are concerning, right?
Yeah.
I just recently started thinking about mRNA vaccines in
Yes.
feedlots and trying to understand, is that an issue? Is that not an issue? I don't really know yet. I don't quite get it. It seems, I don't know how an mRNA or a lipoprotein would get through my mouth, even let alone through my stomach, without being destroyed. So I'm not convinced it makes a difference, but I've been convinced I've been wrong many times. So I'm humble. I'm humble in my relationship to these things.
Yeah, I love that about you. I can't even tell you how important that is to me and how much respect I have for you for that. That is our number one question lately in customer support is, do they get these vaccines? But okay, so in the way that we approach mental health in this country, seeing the transformation that you had, is there anything that you would want to change? Would you want to make diet like a baseline therapy? I know we're not suggesting it's going to be perfect and the cure all for everyone, but do you think it's important enough for us to change the way we approach it?
Here's you're getting at something here that I have a concern about, that we in this country, we confuse mental health and we confuse multiple things: mental health, mental illness, and wellness. Those are three different things. On the wellness front, of course, of course, with this, it has to be full scale. This is what we got in wellness: is diet, exercise, sleep, relationships. I mean, this is how you maintain wellness, and we barely really do that the way we should in terms of really coaching people up on the nuances that you're talking about today, how to maintain healthy sleep and how the exercise impacts sleep, what kind of exercise for how long and how many days a week, and then how to maintain relationships in a way that impact wellness. We do that horribly. And so there's a lot in wellness, and wellness overlaps with mental health. Wellness is not a direct correlation. This is the part I think people think that wellness means mental health. No, it does not. No, it does not. That the brain is under the influence of lots of things: genetics, alcohol, substances, trauma, There's a lot of stuff that affect the brain's functioning.
Mm.
And wellness is somewhat of a buffer against all that, right? It overlaps with it and sort of helps. When a friend of mine named Dan Siegel gives a lecture where he talks about how even in psychiatry and psychology, there's no definition of what is mental health. What is that? We don't really define it. We don't really think about it. Like in my world, in general medicine, we don't define disease. I have to go out and define disease for people because they never do that.
Yeah.
And the difference between a disease and a syndrome. And so there's things there to talk about. But he said really what it is, mental health should be maximum stability, flexibility, adaptability. And then I was like adding being able to manage reality on reality's terms. And if you can do all that in a flexible way and still have satisfaction and nourishment in terms of flourishing in your life, that's pretty much mental health. And again, overlaps with wellness. But in spite of all of that, things happen to our brain and we can get various syndromes of various types. They're all, categorized in the DSM-5, and we can argue about if we overdo that, but certainly those are categories of things that happen to human brains. And as we've discussed, the first order of business is the wellness. And we always, when I'm working with drug addicts, always hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Address that first. Just first things first. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And that's back again to what I was saying about relationships and managing things. Get sleep, get nutrition, have important people around you that care about you and support you. Then we start to look at whether your brain chemistry, based on its genetics and its relationship with the environment, that's the thing that we're working on, is the relationship with the gene and the environment create a phenomenon, a biological state. Does that state have a natural history associated with it where you could really be harmed, and we have to intervene in some way, at least in the short term, to get that back in line? And there are times when, we have to do that. You have to do that. Brains get sick, hearts get sick. I mean, thankfully, we have these chemicals we use to adjust the physiology. They're dangerous. They're fraught with lots of problems. But the job of somebody like me is to assess that risk reward always. Every time somebody puts something in their mouth or injected into them, the risk reward comes clearly in the favor of the reward in terms of the evolution and the natural history of the illness you're trying to treat. And when that is in at hand, you don't just automatically keep people on medication just because they've been doing well. It's because there's got to be a very clear continued risk reward benefit. And I think that's where people get it. We get it a little wrong. We overdo the medicating, we underdo the wellness and the mental health and the relationships. And if you underdo that long enough, then we're stuck with medication, right? Because things will go off into a zone that becomes somewhat dangerous, and we have to find ways to adjust that natural history so at least it's no longer dangerous again, and we can push you back into the wellness mental health zone and manage that there. That's the ideal way of doing it. And there are brains that require, or you may have injured it, or maybe a head injury. There can be things that happen to brains that need something more persistent and more aggressive. But again, we tend to overdo it and sustain it.
Absolutely. And so if you were, I guess, thinking about parents out there or people who just wanted to enhance the wellness in their lives so that maybe wouldn't have to lean on the things, the more persistent chemicals later, where would you have people begin? What do you think are the most important foods to remove, if we're talking just about food, other than the other things, and maybe the more important foods to add as well?
So the unhealthy fats. Look at Kate Shanahan as a chart. There's healthy fats, intermediate fats, unhealthy fats, and we are loaded with unhealthy fats. It is mortifying to me. Then I would, and again, this is parenting I'm thinking about. Then the reliance on yummy, man. We are we are addicting our kids early and often. And sometimes I think that really the key, because people don't do, people aren't like you and I thinking about things this way. It's hard for them. I can tell you, it's hard. Change is hard. Sustaining change, doing something every day is really hard for people. I'm sympathetic to that. I work in the world of change. I'm trying to get people to stop doing drugs, and that is hard. But it's hard to get, a 60-year-old, somebody that's been living life a certain way, to put a medication in their mouth twice a day. They won't do it. 3 times a day, impossible, just to reach a pill and put him out 3 times a day. They won't do it. And so changing diet and changing your relationship, things like that, is very hard. However, I sometimes think to myself, really, in terms of getting people started, and this is on a, sort of the mass scale, is just eating consciously. Just back to that attentional mechanism I was talking about, just stopping and thinking about what you're putting in your mouth. You will change what you do. You will change it. Because what you're going to do unthinkingly is what the food is designed to make you do. Just put it in and more of it. It's designed for that. It's carefully crafted. These people do their job brilliantly. That they're it's more, better, yummier, it's more addictive. It's just more of that coming your way. That's their job. And you need to do one thing: just stop, read a label. Just read a label. Look at the carbohydrate content. Look what the fats are in there. Just read labels. It's really all you have to do, and you will automatically change. And then if you want to get into what we're talking about here, it's also now not, thanks to you guys, it's not that hard either. You've got ready to hand stuff that meets all the criteria that you will want to be a responsible, animal advocate, a responsible climate advocate, and doing good for yourself with diet. I mean, that's just, it's a good time to be paying attention to your diet. It's sort of never been better.
Yeah, it is. And it's simple, but like you said, not necessarily easy.
And we know more, and we know more too. You know what I'm saying? Like Kate was saying, we know certain things. We know it. Don't listen to the food pyramid now has Lucky Charms on it, for Christ's sake. Is that not enough to make you realize that bureaucrats don't know what the hell they're talking about?
Oh my gosh. And did you see cereal got a higher score than like beef and eggs in this nutrient profile rating system? Do you have a comment about that?
It's throw it away. The complete bureaucracy is the enemy. Everybody, did we not? Did that? I hope you learned that during COVID. That was the main lesson. That centralization of any kind of medical decision making goes bad. It goes bad. The way the government approaches you is that you can't handle the truth. I assure you, you can. I assure you can. You can make your own decisions. All you got to do is start doing it, and you'll very quickly adjust, because it's there. It's clear what you need to do.
Oh, I love it. Okay, my last question for you. I'm sure you're aware of Dr. Georgia Eads. Do you know her?
No, tell me.
Oh my goodness!
Tell me
so
about.
She was a Harvard-trained psychiatrist.
Oh,
and do you know her? Maybe you do.
I know that they're big. I'm gonna read her stuff. Georgia, how do you spell her last name?
Dr. Georgia Eads, Eds. Now she's a big advocate. I believe at one time at least carnivore. From her, I've learned about some of the research in terms of keto and carnivore for.
I should have read her stuff before I came on here. Now I'm going to be much more.
Well, you just go read it now, because all I was going to say.
Me.
Yeah, and she said the binge eating disorder she was noticing was responding well to lower carbohydrates, keto for some people.
That's sort of me. I'm binge eating thing. That's sort of what I was describing to you. Was carb binge. Carb does that too. Oh yeah, look at this. This is awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering.
I didn't even talk about ketogenic diet and effect on mood. Ketogenic per se, in and of itself. And by the way, early on I think I was doing keto. I felt like I was on keto, and I'm optimal when I'm on keto. I just can't sustain it.
Yeah,
I noticed that when I have optimal energy and optimal everything, mood, I get a little bit elevated mood actually from keto.
I know. I think a lot of people do. And I was just wondering if you wanted to talk about any of the research there, and then if there was a research project you could design, would there be one to look at any other underlying mechanism? But yeah, I'm really excited about. There's Alzheimer's, Dale Bredesen. It's clear that diet's impacting the mind, but keto seems to be one lever we can pull.
Yeah, and of course, the original observation was in seizures, where it really so clearly something was going on.
Yes.
Oh, look at this. This is go to her website, diagnosisdiet.com. Really good.
Yeah. And she
Uh,
actually left Harvard because they told her as a psychiatrist she shouldn't be talking about diet.
wow.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
You
interesting.
know, the landscape of medicine is changing so much and so fast. We are much less dogmatic. I
Yeah.
about midway through my career, I thought to myself, God, we're a little culty. We are a little bit cultish in how we are in terms of how we train each other and how we think
Yeah.
about things, and that's sort of breaking down. Oh my
It's
God,
good.
carnivore diet for mental health. I don't have a research idea off the top of my head. It would definitely be in the inflammatory zone.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm interested in inflammation. Kate got me interested in inflammation and cytokines.
Yeah. I
Uh,
love it.
and so I would probably go somewhere in that zone, but I'd have to really think about how to design it in a way that you'd be able to really say something.
Yep. Yep. And that's hard to do, but I love that. And if there's any last thoughts you think for people that would be helpful, where to begin, how important is this, or just anything, any other words of wisdom you think we left out, then I'd love to hear it.
Well, that if you're in the if you're in the wellness category and you're looking to sustain well-being and sustain health, I don't understand how you could think other than what we're talking about. So if you're having trouble, read, you know, right here, you can read this diagnosis diet. You can read, do you guys have a website? Do you have a website where you're
Oh yeah, but
research?
mostly it's built around the physical products as of right now, but
How about your research and stuff? Because you're clearly, are you
yeah,
blogging anywhere that you can read it?
not yet, but my dissertation is coming soon,
Okay.
so
Okay. Once you get off
I'll
onto
make
that, all right.
yeah.
All right. Then we're going to have blogs. We're going to set up a site for you. We'll bring you
Yep.
back on my podcast and we can talk about all this stuff. But I just think so strongly it is about paying attention. It's funny. I'm more into this right now than I've been in a long time. I've been a little bit less mindful of how this should be done optimally.
Mm.
I've been a little loosey goosey, as you hear my history. I've been a little sort of lazy. I'm lazy at it, even though I pay attention and I just go in and out. And I lately, I think it's my messed up shoulders and and the fact that
Yeah.
I've just been going further down the road with this and finding more data and more solutions. Just pay attention, read labels. That's my real advice to you. Don't leave out exercise. Again, back to change and how difficult it is for people.
Yeah.
What I start with on exercise is the exercise you'll do is the one you like. The one you'll do is the one you'll do. So don't force
Mm.
yourself to do something you won't do. Start with something that you enjoy and that you will do, and then kind of build from there. And it becomes like recovery. You know, recovery and drug addiction becomes its own self-sustaining process.
Yeah.
And I would say that's even my story right now. You know, I started this carnivore thing 5 years ago. I am much more down the line in terms of being reasonable and thoughtful and doing things properly than I was back then. Then I was eating a lot of meat. And I was lifting a lot of heavy weights, and that was fun. And I kind of liked that. And that was what I would do. That was what I would do at the time. But there was a more optimal way, and I'm sort of getting into that now.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your flexibility and for your passion around this topic. It's been a real honor, and I just can't wait till we connect next time. So
Yes,
thank you
whatever
so
we can
much
do
again,
to
Andrew.
support what you're doing. When you got blogs coming out, send them my way, and let's get the word out. We want people to be healthier.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so